Hey guys, welcome to Coffee with Kish. Please like and subscribe so that these videos start to circulate more. It seems like the algorithm probably likes that. Today I'm going to talk about a stage in every ex-Mos journey. Every? Nah, that may be an exaggeration, but in the journey of many LDS people as they leave the LDS Church, and that is called the angry exmo. I say angry exmo is a stage. It's a stage. Yeah, that's right. It's a stage that a lot of people experience when they leave the LDS Church. So why? Why are ex-Mos on their way out of the LDS Church angry? And another good question is, how long will they stay in that phase? Is there any light at the end of the tunnel there where they're no longer angry ex-Mos? It kind of depends on the person. Some people in leaving the LDS Church will convert to another religious point of view that actually also has a beef with the LDS Church. And so when they interact with people on the subject of Mormonism, on the subject of the LDS Church, even though they've moved on to a new religious group, they will still express their anger about the LDS Church and take things out on the LDS Church. So, ex-Mos. How do people become ex-Mos? I think the truth of the matter is, at least as far as I have experienced it, is that it's a conversion process. So, as far as I've experienced it, according to my experience and my reading, becoming an ex-Mo or ex-LDS person is a conversion process, much like finding a new faith or changing political points of view in a radical way. Human beings are susceptible to converting to new ways of thinking. Now, it doesn't happen, though, in a linear way. We'd like to think that it's a linear process where, suddenly you're sitting with someone, they're reasoning through problems with you, and suddenly the light goes on and you say, oh my gosh, I was wrong. Now I can see things in an entirely different way. Sometimes it could seem like that if you just look at a little window of time in which someone has a light pop on and suddenly they have a new perspective on things. But I really think the process is more organic and a lot longer than just suddenly the light goes on. Now, I've had in my life, in various things, the light has suddenly gone on in my head. Like I remember at least the emotional experience of learning how to read, where suddenly everything clicked into place. But I think that's where we get, mixed up, because what we're not remembering when things suddenly click into place is what our mind was processing in the background for so long before finally things clicked into place. So was Kish an angry ex-Mo? Well, arguably, some people might say I'm still an angry ex-LDS person. I don't call myself an ex-Mo because as I've said before in my last video, I consider myself to be a Mormon from the cradle, a Mormon through generations before, and a pioneer stock Mormon person. So I don't consider myself ex-Mormon, but ex-LDS, yeah. But am I an angry ex-LDS person? I don't think I am. Of course, I'm going to have a favorable view of myself, but I don't think I'm an angry ex-LDS person. I think I've largely come to terms with it because I finally sat back and thought one day, maybe that's just not the club for me, right? And I was at peace with that. Maybe that's not my club. Maybe that's not where I'm comfortable in life. And maybe I can just move on from that and do other things. Now, I didn't feel like it meant I had to move on from being interested in Mormonism or consider myself Mormon, But I no longer felt like I had this beef with the LDS Church that I had to be vociferous about all the time. And I didn't feel like I had to run online and pick fights with LDS apologists, or I didn't feel like I really had to go online and reveal the truth about the LDS Church and all of the problems with it. But that's kind of what being an ex-Mormon is for a few people. And now it's true, there are a whole bunch of exmos that just, they probably weren't that into it in the first place, or when they leave, it's not a big deal to them because, they have this easy transition out. But I'm here to talk about angry exmos, and there's definitely a category of people that I would call angry exmos, and or angry, disillusioned member of the church who will probably soon be an exmo, either voluntarily or in some very noteworthy cases, notorious cases even, excommunicated by the LDS Church. So the LDS Church is not a democratic organization. I don't think that'll be a surprise to anyone. And so leaving it is either you deciding voluntarily that you want to leave, or causing such a ruckus because you're unhappy that the church decides that it wants you to leave. And even though there are procedures, they had been known to be bent in the past a little bit when a high-level leader of the church looks at a person who's a particular problem and says, oh, we have to get rid of this problem person, calling up the stake president, the equivalent of the bishop of a diocese, maybe an apostle like Elder Boyd K. Packer gets on the phone and talks to the stake president and says, we really have to do something about this guy. So either you're going to do it, or we'll find somebody else to take your place who will do this thing. Get rid of this thorn in our side, this complaining member who's seeking attention. But what brings people here, right? What makes an angry exmo or an angry, disillusioned member who's very vocal? Well, it's usually when they come to think that the LDS Church has been lying to them. And I think it's fair to say that thanks to the gift of the internet and all of the information that one can access, and to documents like the CES letter by Jeremy Reynolds, you can easily come across information that looks pretty bad or quite different from the information that you were taught when you were brought into the LDS Church, educated in the teachings of the LDS Church, and practicing Mormonism or practicing the LDS faith. And that's because, hey, let's face it, churches come up with rather curated narratives about what are the important things to believe, what's the story of the faith, what's its history, and it's never going to really correspond perfectly with all of the data that one might find out there. And in a time when people have distrust of institutions, and that's partly because we have such great access to so much information, but distrust of institution leads to people, when they find this information, their fears are affirmed in a sense. They thought that maybe it was the case, for some reason or other, they came to think that maybe it was the case that they weren't getting the whole story, that all wasn't what they thought it was, and then they find this confirmation online somewhere, and they get really, really upset. So what was my process like? My process really started at Brigham Young University. That's how I started to become disillusioned with the LDS Church. Because I was, kind of geeky, and as you know, I love geeking out about Mormonism, but a lot of the stuff that I discovered when I was geeking out about Mormonism and learning more about the LDS Church, its doctrine, its practices, its history. A lot of the stuff that I was finding didn't really match the narrative that the church provides. Now, these days, I'm not that really concerned about it. I understand that this is a pretty common phenomenon. If you took any number of churches and if you were to dissect them and take all of the information that you could probably find online, you would see that the official narrative, the faithful narrative, the loyal or devotional narrative is not going to match all of the data out there. But, the LDS Church is a relatively young organization, and I don't think that it has really done the best job dealing with this situation. They've been caught rather flat-footed, and so I would say yes, as the internet came into being, Kish also found a lot of information that didn't match the standard LDS narrative, and it made him very upset, speaking of me in the third person. And I, also got involved a lot in online debates between apologists and critics, many of them like evangelical critics or Protestant critics, you might say, of the LDS Church. And I came to see that in my studies, some of the information that critics would bring up about the LDS Church that apologists would try to minimize or deny. The facts weren't really backing up the apologists sometimes so much as backing up the critics. And, that didn't really trouble me that the narratives weren't matching up in that way. What really bugged me was the fact that apologists seem so impervious to the facts. From my perspective, I was saying, well, look, we have these facts. Like, okay, Brigham Young taught that Adam was God. And the facts really line up to show that he did teach that. And yet an apologist might say, oh, well, that he didn't teach that, or it was just a theory, or they would just come up with a lot of workarounds to try to say, well, no, it's not what you really think it is, and the critics have got this all wrong, and they're mistaken about all of this. So don't worry, don't fret, don't worry about Brigham Young teaching that Adam was God, because it's just been misconstrued. It just doesn't work. It frankly doesn't work. Now, this doesn't mean that there aren't explanations for things like that, Adam, God, doctrine, and so forth. But the real wrestling with these problems involves a lot more than the apologists are either equipped to do or comfortable doing in the light of current LDS doctrine. Because here's the problem with the apologists. They are hampered by having to maintain the current party line that the church has. And when they do deviate from that, sometimes their worst critics in deviating against that are the same people who are criticizing the church. So the critics will slam them either for not fessing up to the problems, or they'll slam them for deviating from the church's standard narrative when they do actually get into these, byways of apologetic discussion. But one thing that seems clear here is that the apologists sadly turn into a site where anger flares against the LDS Church. Anger is, a lot of that anger is aimed at apologists who, they do what they do voluntarily. Most of them aren't called to do this even on the sly by the LDS Church. A lot of them are just average members who believe in the LDS Church and are trying to do everything they can to protect the church and its reputation, something that they love. They love their faith, they love the LDS Church, they want to protect it, and here they start talking with critics online, and the critics are just slamming and slamming and slamming. And it's not just that they're coming up with different explanations or saying things that, they're airing their grievances, so to speak, with these facts that don't match up with the church's official narrative. But it's the negativity and the anger and the insult that's thrown at apologists. And the sad fact is that a lot of times the apologists will aim the same anger back at these critics. And I've been online doing this kind of thing for ages. And finally I just got tired of it, honestly. And it's not that I got tired of learning the history, learning all the facts, thinking about Mormonism, etc., etc. But I really got tired of expecting things from apologists and from the LDS Church that I just wasn't going to get. I mean, they have their own goals. They don't match my goals. And it's not like they're going to say, oh, you're right. And you get particularly dedicated ones who really know their stuff, who know the history of the church, know a lot about religion, know a lot about the history of Christianity, etc., etc. And they're going to stick to their guns. Even if you think you have them dead to rights, they're just going to stick to their guns. And of course, I think the notorious person in this vein, this type of apologist would be, for example, Professor Daniel C. Peterson, now retired from BYU, who, was at the center of all of these battles often and was really stubbornly committed to his own perspective and would often do what he could, I think, to kind of trip up constructive discussions of problems with the LDS narrative or LDS history, the official history, etc., 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 because his primary goal was to protect the institution and to protect the faith and to protect testimonies. That's how he saw it, and he was relentless in doing that. But honestly, this made a lot of people angry. It did not make people happy because they felt like, these guys aren't being honest. And in a sense, I guess you could say that's true, but they had a fervent belief in the truth, the divine truth of their faith. And so for them, in the meantime, if the facts didn't align very well, that wasn't as important to them as being true to their covenants with God, doing the job of supporting the testimonies of members of the church, and to the extent possible, fending off these spoilers, these angry people who are online causing problems, as it were. Well, I was one of those people, all right? But I'm saying I had that phase, the angry exmo phase. And it came on over time. And it started when I thought that the church's narrative didn't really make sense to me. And it didn't come all at once. It's not like I woke up one day and said, oh, this is false. This is bogus. I'm no longer doing this anymore. It was a heck of a lot more complicated than that. Because I was still living the life of an LDS person, still enjoying a lot of things about it. And yet I saw that certain things didn't line up. And also, let's be honest, on a social level, I was kind of disgruntled. And I don't think in the exmo formula here, you can leave out the social significance of the conversion process. If you engage regularly with apologists and you feel like they're not being straight with you, if they appear obstinate to you, if they're rude to you, then you start to sort of see the image of the institution in them, and you want to attack them because you can't aim your ire directly at the leaders of the church, they're not available. But the apologists make themselves available. They serve as the cannon fodder, as it were. And so you're, as an angry, disillusioned, or recently exmo person, are running at them and fighting with them to the best of your ability. And really, it can be invigorating. It's rewarding, in a sense, to take your anger out on these people, and to feel justified in moving away from this thing, because you feel like this isn't right. People should be able to tell me the truth. They should be able to be factual with me, and there's no accountability. There seems to be no accountability. The leaders of the church don't seem to know what they're talking about. The apologists are stubborn and rude and combative, and nobody's really helping me out. And so you can stay there a long time. You can feel like you're being lied to a long time. Now, have church leaders in the past hidden things, or amended the record, or not really acknowledged the facts or the most likely scenarios, historical scenarios that are backed up by the evidence? Indubitably. These things have happened, but I think the greater part of them who are out there doing their best to lead this giant organization of millions of members probably just don't have any idea what's going on. They're not really interested in the things that got you upset with the church, and they're probably not even equipped to deal with it. So they're glad to have these cannon fodder apologists go out there and fight on their behalf, because, number one, they don't want to take the time to do that work. They have a church to run, which is a lot. That's their primary responsibility. But then, they also don't want to be in the position where something they say can be identified as the church's official position. And the church is really, I think, in a sense, better off, at least in their perspective, not having an official position on a lot of the problems in the LDS narrative. LDS people are trained to be great literalists in their beliefs. In fact, they take pride in the fact that their religion teaches them that they know the literal truth about the things that literally happened in the past, about Jesus literally visiting ancient Hebrew Christians living in the Americas. That, literal angels came down and put their hands on the head of Joseph Smith, and resurrected beings gave him the priesthood, and all of these things literally happened. And once you've got your narrative tied to these very unforgiving positions about the literal truth of all these things, well, you almost have no choice but to continue to back that stuff up to the best of your ability, even when the preponderance of the evidence is against you. And so what apologists are doing often is they're saying, well, it's still possible. You haven't proven it didn't happen. You didn't prove that there weren't ancient Hebrew Christians who were descended from Israelites from ancient Palestine, living in Mesoamerica. It could be. You wouldn't know what you were looking for anyway. I'm not laughing so much about the beliefs. I'm laughing at the real straits that these apologists are in. Now, accept this answer dozens and dozens of times when it's not adding up for you. And that's why you're getting angry. All right? Because, look, the LDS Church expects of its members an awful lot. And honestly, that's, I think, one of its strengths. If it's just a casual club to belong to, it doesn't mean anything. You may forget to go back to get your coupon stamped because you're busy and you have other things to do. But the LDS Church requires a whole lot of its members. So they've invested a whole lot. And I think they look at that certainty they have about these claims, these really startling claims, like, okay, God the Father and Jesus Christ visited Joseph Smith in the sacred grove, and they were embodied beings of flesh and bone that were resurrected. I mean, just all of these like really hard, literal, astounding claims that, Joseph Smith found these gold plates, and they're real gold plates made by this real Hebrew civilization that were really given to him by an angel and really written in Reformed Egyptian. And so you've really invested in this worldview that has so many certainties about things that are really, at the end of the day, difficult to be certain about. But then you push through with your faith. You push through, you keep investing. You're giving 10% of your income to the church. You're giving 2 years of your life to serve a mission. You're making all of the sacrifices of not drinking coffee or alcohol. You're not smoking. You're living a lifestyle that's so different from your friends. You're not looking at pornography. These are ideally all the things that you're doing to be a good member of the LDS Church. And then you find out that the narrative isn't what you thought it was. Wow. That makes you angry. That makes you angry. That makes you feel like you've been lied to. That makes you feel like you were a dupe or a fool. And you become an angry, disillusioned member of the church, and probably very soon an angry ex-Mormon conundrum. So I understand your anger, and if you need to go online and vent because you're suffering with that, I'm certainly not going to say that I have any business telling you not to do that, because you probably need to do that to survive psychologically in that circumstance. So I'm not telling you not to be angry. I'm not. I want you to navigate it the best that you can and do what you need to do to be healthy and happy and sane. So I am glad that there are places like discussmormonism.com where people can aim their anger at me instead of their friends and relatives. Be it about politics or religion or any of the things that, maybe we don't need to vent about face to face with other people and make them upset and alienate them over. Anyway, that's Coffee with Kish this time. Angry exmo phenomenon. It's a thing. Take care, and please like and subscribe.